Thank you. Thanks, Ken. And yeah, I feel like I'm a native San Franciscan. I've lived here for 30 plus years. So, and I'm delighted to be joined by a very esteemed group here. The focus here is accessibility and how AI, I believe, makes the world more accessible. It has the potential to do that. Now, there's a potential downside. Let's not get too hung up on that. Because I really think that it can have a positive impact. A little bit of background on myself. So I'm a repeat entrepreneur. I wasn't a founder, but was part of the founding team at a company called Otter.ai, which gave me, it sort of helped me understand a little bit about how AI can be used for accessibility. A primary use case for Otter, which is a transcription and note-taking platform, was accessibility in higher education. And it just sort of fell into our laps. People heading up accessibility at the UCs, at Harvard and elsewhere, provisioned Otter instead of having to recruit volunteer note-taking. And for the last number of years, I've been working in the area of speech-to-speech translation, seeking to bridge cultural and linguistic gaps using AI. But let's go down, and I'd like you each to briefly introduce, I'll introduce the panelists, and then I'd like you each to talk a little bit about a specific initiative you're working on in the application of AI in the day-to-day. So I'm joined by Rónán Iomaire from Údarás na Gaeltachta, which is responsible for economic development in the Gaeltachta areas and Irish-speaking areas in Ireland. Andrew Broderick, who's an old friend and former colleague at SRI, who is with the San Francisco Tech Council, focused on digital inclusion, and Aileen with ServiceNow, who owns accessibility products. So starting with you, Aileen, talking a little bit about AI in the workplace and its role in accessibility. And can you make it a little bit more concrete and talk about a specific initiative you're working on right now?
Sure. Is this on?
Yeah.
Sure. I do agree with you, Séamus, that I think AI is going to be a game changer for people with disabilities. And I know there's some trepidation in the disability community to make sure that, it's responsible and not biased. But there's also excitement, and some excitement I have is around a couple of things that we've been working on at ServiceNow. One of them is called voice input, and what it is basically any agent or user of ServiceNow software, which is enterprise software that people use, so a worker in a company, they can instead, if they have a disability and a mobility issue, they can use voice to do the work instead of having to use a keyboard. And, back, I don't know, a few years ago, I don't know if some people saw that skit on YouTube of the two gentlemen from Scotland in the elevator, right? It's advanced so far from there. And so we're seeing great results. We test at ServiceNow. We invite people with disabilities to test with us. And so one of the things we've seen is whether it's you have a speech impediment or a strong accent, it's still delivering really good results now. So very encouraging to see that. And I think that's one example of a project that I'm working on. The other one is around for people who are blind and use a screen reader. When you arrive on a website or a page, if you're sighted, you see the whole layout of the user interface, right? You can see, oh, there's a list over there, there's a form, there's a header, and there's 3 things in the corner that are urgent. Whereas if you're blind, you don't necessarily you can't do that. With a screen reader, you have to tab through everything. So we implemented something called screen reader summarization. and it gives a quick summary to that screen reader, the user who's using a screen reader, and they get a sense of what's important on the page and what the page contains. So there are two just concrete examples of where I see AI really helping.
And is that now being shipped as part of the ServiceNow bundle? Or is that more for your internal use?
No, it's shipped for our customers as well. We use it internally as well for our employees, but shipped for our customers to use too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And Rónán, why don't we talk a little bit about some initiatives at Údarás in terms of making sure that the Irish language is represented in AI?
Yeah, so
anything you want to talk about?
yeah, sure, yeah. So I think, like in terms of language and AI, the whole question of inclusivity and the challenges around that, come to mind straight away. So, say for example yourself, Séamus, a serial entrepreneur, if you had an idea for something, you can use AI pretty quickly to create either a concept or the product itself, either using AI to build it or creating a product that's AI enabled. The challenge around doing that with the Irish language is the scaffolding or the framework needed, doesn't exist as yet, because it is what would be defined as a low resource language. So that digitally, that corpus, that those data sets that large language models use don't exist to the same extent in Irish. So that's a key part of the challenge. That's one of the key roles that we have in terms of Údarás na Gaeltachta, is ensuring that for the future, so that the language doesn't become redundant in an AI-enabled society, and that it is inclusive, and that the language is included, is that we make sure that that corpora, etc., is built into it. So one of the products we are working on at the moment is, in Ireland, is a bilingual state by law, so Irish and English, and all state services need to provide services in English and in Irish. Many of them, however, have a challenge with providing the services in Irish, and even when they do, people tend not to engage with them because, like, the Irish is clumsy or technical or kind of off-putting. So we're working on a project at the moment, trialing it with one particular government agency at the moment, and then looking to spread it past that, where it's a kind of a chatbot that you speak to in an engaged and easily understood Irish, so that we see levels of usage increase, but also the overheads for our agencies, etc., decreasing by the deployment of it.
Andrew, so you're focused on digital inclusion. Talk a little bit about what that means in the context of the work you're doing with the San Francisco Tech Council, and a lot of that is around language, right?
Definitely. So I'm with an organization in San Francisco, which is a multi-sector collaborative. So we're really trying to work across sectors, government, nonprofit, and private sector organizations who serve older adults and adults living with disabilities. And digital inclusion is our mission, has been our mission since 2015. And that was really, at that time, it was about getting people connected to broadband, making sure they have devices and get skills and training. I would say 10 years down the road, we're in our kind of SF Tech Council 3.0, because now AI brings a new dimension to the digital divide or to digital inclusion. And I think we're really in a reset mode now, really thinking about, like, well, what does digital inclusion mean moving forward? What does it mean for the work that we're doing? And what does it mean for the organizations who serve them? So a project that, I should also mention, a lot of the population in San Francisco, a lot of people don't recognize, 28% of the city population are over 60 or an adult living with a disability. Over 50% of them speak a language other than English as a primary language. So AI is really a great enabler in terms of addressing a lot of the barriers that people have had previously with language and navigating government services or just being online in general. But what we see as a major need, and what we're focusing on now as a project, is really the organizations that serve older adults and adults with disabilities. So City of San Francisco gives out $5 billion a year in contracts to these CBOs or nonprofits to deliver services. these organizations haven't even got out the gate yet with AI. They don't have any formal policies, they don't have any workforce development, and like the previous speaker said, they're really adopting informally AI at the individual level within the organization. So we are trying to focus on a more capacity building, the organizations serving older adults and adults with disabilities, and how they can leverage AI to be more efficient and to also kind of be more engaging with the services that they're delivering. Sorry.
Interesting. You know, when I've been helping a number of companies in the construction industry think about AI, and I'm talking about guys doing between 2 and 25 million in revenue. They don't use software. They freaking hate it because they have to adopt it, and they're too busy, and it just gets in their way. They got to be able to talk to it, and it's got to adapt to them. And I see it as a big opportunity. So this idea of adaptation rather than adoption, is there something there for, like, is the work you're doing around accessibility more broadly applicable outside of just working with people with disabilities? Is there sort of bigger initiatives in that, you know, software itself just becomes more adaptable over time that has an impact then on people, on overall inclusion?
I think so. I think, you know, simplifying the UI as well and making sure that it's more conversational. I think that will, you know, when you think about it, I think it's an 8th grader that you're supposed to be developing any user interface or any content for. And anything that you can do to make it more simple or intuitive is with AI can help. So we're looking at ideas as well around, like, take for example, so we bake accessibility into our platform, but we also offer preferences, user preferences, so people can work the way they want to work. So for example, if I'm somebody where, you know, if there's flashes on the screen or something that might be not suitable for me, I can turn those off. But currently, you kind of have to seek those out, right? Like if you go to your settings in Apple or on your phone or something else, you kind of have to seek it out and then understand what that impact will do. So instead of that, we're looking at ways with AI where, you know, based on your behavior, I could recommend things. Like if I'm primarily a keyboard user and I can't use a mouse, and I see that you're, you know, actively using a keyboard all the time, I can offer up, hey, did you know we have 40+ keyboard shortcuts that might help you in your job? So I think making it simple, intuitive, easier to use is one of the things that will happen with AI.
And Andrew, are you seeing sort of examples of that, this adaptation? Is there any sort of new things you've seen that have excited you?
Well, I was at CES earlier this year. There was a lot around disability and AI, more from a communication perspective in terms of helping people with communication barriers. There's a lot around virtual reality, you know, that is being kind of developed. There's a whole new technology category now called age tech, which is all about improving the aging experience. So a lot of the startups in there obviously have layered AI onto their kind of platforms in ways that they're trying to personalize and adapt to the individual in the home environment, or, you know, through whatever device they may be using, like smartphones and kind of tablets, etc., or wearables. So there's definitely a lot more adaptation around the individual through personalization that we're seeing, yeah.
And is this relevant to some of the work you've been doing at Údarás, like making sure that you can adapt to...
Yeah, I think the opportunity for adaptation and the opportunity for, you know, I suppose a rebalancing of inclusivity around language is just enormous. You know, if you take, you know, where we are now, you know, in a kind of like internet content creation world, which is, you know, skewed heavily away from, you know, non-English languages, and the opportunity now that AI has, you know, to kind of like recalibrate that. So when I was growing up, I grew up in, you know, I spoke Irish before I spoke English. It was Irish in the household, Irish in the environment. Really, the only English I'd come across throughout the day really was, you know, at breakfast reading the back of the cornflakes box, you know, like the radio was in Irish, etc., etc. Like that's completely, you know, and then, you know, if there was a shift in the medium, you know, like radio, then, you know, an Irish language radio station was founded, or in TV, an Irish language TV station was founded. But what do you do, up against, niche interests on YouTube, like all of the social media platforms? You're not going to, stem the tide by, trying to like double down on creating in Irish or like in Javanese, like 50 million speakers, but like looking at, so for example, even the without giving you a plug here, Séamus, like, but like products that such as Speechlab that you have yourself, that can take a language, take a piece of content, and then that you can like seamlessly dub or translate it, but while keeping the nuance in voice and accent and everything, so that you're not marginalizing or alienating the listener or the viewer in any way. I think there's a huge opportunity there. But to be able to leverage that, I think is really, really important for like organizations such as Údarás and Gaeltachta and other organizations, as well as, like the private sector itself, even though it's less likely to kind of, invest in, in minority or lesser used languages. But it's really important right now to make sure that, that foundational work is done so that the opportunity that does exist will be leveraged.
Yeah.
Can I add to that a
Yeah,
little bit?
please, go on.
Just interested about, I was just thinking about, the language aspect. Like lately, I've been working on something actually with Trinity in Dublin, and it's research we're doing around sign language. And what you were saying there, and for people, I don't know if there's anybody who's deaf or hard of hearing in the audience, but one of the things that I learned, I didn't know this, but they consider sign language their first language and English as a second language. And so they much prefer, from the research we're doing, is to communicate in sign language and not have to type and read English. So that was kind of an interesting angle. So what we're thinking is, with AI, what can we do to improve that experience? Like sign language, if I'm calling a help desk and I prefer to sign, how can I do that? Or without the other person knowing how to sign. So there's lots of, it's interesting, the whole language aspect of it as well, yeah.
How far along has that come? Where is that initiative at?
Well, we can talk more about it later. We wanted to hear, there's a saying, I guess, what is it? Not with me, but what is it? Nothing for us without us. And that's a quote from the disability community. I forget who had the original quote, but what that means is that, they want, it's when we develop anything or design a new feature, we want to invite people who have disabilities to do it. So we've invited a whole bunch of people. We got great response and to participate in this research we're doing. So if there's anybody else who who would like to join the research, let me know. It's ongoing right now, but I'm very optimistic that AI can solve some of these communication barriers.
And we are going to make a lot of money from solving these problems. Like, are there opportunities to like, and have there been, like, I know for Otter, which is, I can't disclose, but it's a very substantial source of revenue. Was accessibility in higher ed, but what are some of the more interesting economic opportunities and Andrew, you work with startups as well, so.
Yeah, well, I could just say from a healthcare, like aging perspective, people want to age in place, stay in the community, live in the home, so they need technology in that context. In San Francisco, again, 30% of people over 60 live alone, so they lack that social connection and network and support that we typically would have in a kind of family home environment. So social companionship is a big area, and you kind of look at what's the cost of people when they're socially isolated. It costs CMS $6 billion a year in terms of the healthcare costs. So I think people want to stay independent, they want a good quality of life, and they want to maintain health and well-being. So there's big opportunities in keeping people in the home and out of institutions. So.
And now, Rónán, I know your focus primarily is the Gaeltachta areas and economic development there, but you're passionate about the language. And can AI, like, I see a big opportunity among the diaspora like myself who've forgotten all their Irish. And my dad was from a Gaeltachta area, so I'm ashamed of it. Like, and my child now is learning the Baron, but I'd love them to know cúpla focal as well. Like, is there a way AI can help promote the language more broadly, building on kneecap? Can we, what's the next, is there a way AI can be used to sort of promote the language? It's a beautiful language, and sort of add life to it for people like myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the like positivity around the language now, you know, compared to even like 20 years ago, like it's shifted hugely. You know, I mean, we did some research recently, and it was like 75% of like people between the ages of like 18 and 35 wanted to increase their levels of Irish. Even in the census, if we look at the census, you know, 1.7 million people put down in Ireland that they speak speak Irish. Now, a lot of that is aspirational. I'd say it's a pretty broad spectrum of linguistic ability in that 1.7, and it's actually 100,000 people who speak it on a daily basis. But I think quite often, you know, the barrier is like moving aspiration to action. You know, so learning a language, you know, there's a barrier there. But like this is a question actually that comes up quite a lot. You know, even like if you're driving in the car, there's a kind of like a bot that will speak to you. You're chatting away, will gently correct you. So it's a conversational thing without. And I think a lot of people fear speaking to somebody with fluent in Irish, in case they feel that they might look bad or whatever. But I think that would take it away. But again, going back to the point, I think all of that is doable. I mean, if it was in English, I mean, you could knock it out tomorrow, right? But the difficulty with Irish is, an interesting point that was made at the conference that we had yesterday on AI and minority language that the minister mentioned was Thomas Mullany, who was a professor in history here in Stanford, said that this is the first time in history where languages of 20 million speakers are now potentially at risk unless they get their act together. So there's the risk, but there's a huge opportunity that can come out of it that we haven't had either.
Great. On that positive note, we'll end this discussion and continue it over lunch. But thank you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Say, Gurv Mahagat.